And you said, "Don't get snappy with me."
I feel like I've got an exclusive here.
Here we go. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stage and television shows all over the world. It is feeling more and more impossible to turn on the television at any given point and not see Pedro Pascal on the screen. The Chilean and American actor has landed major roles in some of the biggest TV shows and movies, including Game of Thrones, The Last of Us, Gladiator 2, and most recently, he joined the Marvel Cinematic Universe as one of the stars of their big summer release, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. However, during the press tour of this release, a lot of viewers noticed that Pedro Pascal was getting a little comfortable with his co-star and on-screen love interest, Vanessa Kirby. Soon after, a lot of clips started to surface and resurface of Pedro Pascal being very handsy with other stars, and social media was flooded with these montages of Pedro Pascal being very touchy-feely. So these clips, like a lot of things today, have the internet split. A lot of people believe that these behaviors are inappropriate, and a lot believe that it's just his way of dealing with the nerves or the anxiety of being in front of the camera. I'm gonna start by showing you these little clips that are circulating, starting with footage of him interacting with Vanessa Kirby, and at the end, I'm gonna show you this really awkward feeling moment between him and Willem Dafoe's wife, Giada Colagrande, at Willem Dafoe's ceremony for his star on the Walk of Fame. Now, when I first saw these clips, I was a little frustrated because a lot of the compilations online just show these little moments. And in behavioral analysis, context is so important. What happened before, what happened after. But for right now, we're just gonna look at these clips. We're gonna talk about what the behaviors suggest. Then we're gonna get the full context and see if it modifies anything, if it gives us more answers. So take a look at just those clips.
Where have you been? Where have you been?
I've been busy.
I know, baby, but you
Answering
can't leave me
questions
alone.
about you.
You can't leave me alone that
I
long.
know.
That's a little too long, baby.
We're needy.
Very codependent, very codependent. Just like I'm very codependent on film.
Well,
And you said, "Don't get snappy with me."
I feel like I've got an exclusive here.
With my finger. With my finger like that.
That is something that I had almost, now I am actually welling up. I had accepted that you're not always going to find your best friends on things. You know what I mean? Like you might find it when you do theatre when you were younger, and on The Crown we definitely had that. And
We are like a family, except that just now in an interview I learned that Pedro is a really bad cook.
Oh dear. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so in the first one, they're at an event promoting the Fantastic Four movie. And Vanessa Kirby is walking almost past him to his left, and he grabs her with two hands by the belly. Note at this point she is pregnant, and positions her right in front of him. So he moves her there and his hands stay in place. You'll even notice he says, "You can't leave me alone for that long, baby." So he pulls her in front of her and wants her to stay there. Now, if you look at her behaviors, there are a couple of interesting things. First of all, you'll notice that her right arm is grabbing his left forearm. And this is one of those things where it really, depending on context, could go either way. When we're comfortable with someone, sometimes we grab their arm. You know, we grab their arm, we grab their leg, and this could very well be something to show a little bit of togetherness or comfort, especially in stressful situations like this, when they're doing all these interviews. So it is a comforting sort of touch. However, we also do see this in certain cases when someone gets a little too close and we're almost getting ready to kind of put them back and, distance them or pull away. So it really, just the holding like this could really go either way. If we look at her left hand, she's talking, they're doing this little bit where she's like, "I've been answering questions about you." And then as it comes down towards his right arm, you'll notice that the fingers are inwards like this. Now, very typically, if you look at people out in the real world, when they're comfortable with each other, couples or very close friends, we usually see more open, relaxed fingers around each other. Again, they might have these touches, grab the arm, grab the leg, or even in the way that they interact, this is a relaxed position. Usually when the fingers come in, that indicates a bit of stress. And the way your hand stays closed like this as it comes downwards indicates a bit of stress and anxiety. But I can't tell you for a fact that it's coming from him. It could be because they're here, the cameras are on, they're answering all these questions, it's a stressful environment, she's moving around a lot, so we can't really know. It does indicate that there's a bit of stress in this moment, but why it's there, hard to tell. Finally, you'll notice that it's a quick interaction, and then when he turns to the camera, she walks away. But if we take a closer look, it really seems like she makes eye contact with that person who's waiting behind him, and then that person leads her out of this conversation. So at the events like this, very often, these movie stars have their agents with them, or whoever does their PR, or their marketing team, whoever it is, whoever's there around with them. And these people will very likely tell them, okay, we gotta go talk to this person, we gotta go over here now. It's a very fast-paced environment. So again, in that context, we can't know if she wanted to walk away, or if it's because whoever's there with her, her team, or this person who works with her told her, hey, we gotta go this way now. In the second clip, which is an interview that they did with The Spill, you'll notice that he comes in for this big bear hug and he just grabs her. And again, we see the same thing with both her hands. They come up and grab his arms. So it's not just rests on, it comes up and it grabs them. And again, this can be interpreted both ways. When we're close with someone and they do that kind of thing, we might hold on to them like this for an extra moment. Like I don't know if that grab is I'm holding on or getting ready to, pull it away. It would look the same both ways. She is smiling in that clip, and it is a genuine smile. The eyes are involved, the whole face is involved. She's kind of laughing, but you'll also notice that there's no turning towards him. She's kind of got her back to him a little bit. So again, it's out of context. It's this big hug. We don't know what's happening before and after. And there are things that suggest discomfort and things that suggest comfort. So we can't really know the answers without the full context. And then later in that interview, there's a clip that's circulating where she's talking, answering questions, and we kind of see him just resting on her like this, kind of leaned on her, and he's looking down, he's just listening to her. And of course, when I first saw that, just that clip, I was like, what's he doing that for? It's a little bizarre that he's not giving his attention to the interviewer. What's going on? But again, all I had was that little clip. And then we have one that is really frustrating, which is when they're with Gordon Ramsay on the cooking show, and it seems like he's holding on to her, and then he puts his other hand on top like this to secure her in place, and we even see her pulling back a little bit like this, and he's just holding on to her hand. And this has been circulating around to demonstrate with these montages that he's really touchy-feely, he's really grabbing her hand and he won't let go. And then finally, the Willem Dafoe clip. So he's leaned down by the star, and then he hooks onto Willem Dafoe's arm to get up, and then he turns around and just gives Giada this face, this chin stroke. It feels very intimate, it feels very close. And then you'll notice Willem Dafoe sees this interaction and says something to Pedro Pascal with this gesture. You see his finger doing this. In their best-selling book, The Definitive Book of Body Language, which is an amazing book on how to read body language in everyday situations, I'll leave a link in the description, but the authors Barbara and Alan Pease go into the research of hand positions when somebody speaks. And this one, with the one finger outwards like this, is the one that we disconnect from the most and feel the most aggression coming from the speaker when they talk like this. The reason for this is simple. We subconsciously connect this to a sword or a stick or a weapon, and that back and forth gesture like this feels like some kind of an attack, even subconsciously. So we disconnect because it triggers fight or flight response. It's also a gesture that we see a lot with disciplining, whether it's a parent or a teacher. Very often with disciplining, you see this kind of thing. So in that moment, Willem Dafoe says something, it almost feels disciplinary, and then you see the smile just wipes away from his face. Immediately after this disciplinary gesture, he turns away from Pedro Pascal as the smile from his face goes away, and we see a couple of things on his face. First, we see a slow blink. So he closes his eyes for a moment like this. At the exact same time, we see an asymmetric smile. The left side of his mouth is going up like this with thin lips. So it's a bit of a compression with the left side of the mouth going up, which suggests a little bit of contempt. Contempt is a universal emotion, which means it looks the same pretty much everywhere in the world, and it's characterized by a scrunching on one side of the mouth. Sometimes it looks like this, sometimes it looks like this. But it creates a line or a tension on only one side of the mouth. And it's usually when we're looking down on something or judging something. Often it's accompanied with an eye roll or this kind of side eye. So it looks like a moment of contempt here, and at the same time we see this eyebrow flash. So the eyebrows are going up, and that's a very common cluster, right? When we see that contempt, instead of this full-on eye roll, we see the eyebrows go up like this with that slow blink. So it's kind of like the eyes are rolling under the eyes. These are all things that very often happen with a bit of irritation. So we see this discipline, he turns away, we see that, and the video stops there. Most of the ones online, on Instagram and TikTok and even YouTube, that's where it ends. So I was very frustrated because I was like, no, what happens immediately after that? I wanted to know. So now that we've seen what the fuss is about, let's go back and consider context, starting with the clip of him with his chin resting on Vanessa Kirby. As a behavioral analyst, when I see a moment like that, I want to know, when did we go from a conversation that we're having with this interviewer to this position? What changed? So let's go take a look at what caused him to go into that position. Here it is.
I actually think to do with this movie, the fact that I'm sitting here next to one of my favorite people in my life.
Oh.
No, I would actually get emotional thinking about
Yeah.
it because that is something that I had almost, now I am actually welling up. I had accepted that you're not always going to find your best friends on things. You know what I mean? Like you might find it when you do theatre when you were younger, and on The Crown we definitely had that. And
Okay, so in that case, she said, I'm sitting here next to one of my favorite people in my life. So she extended this compliment, this thing that suggests how close they are, and he just showed appreciation by bringing his chin down and leaving it there for a little while. Now, if we see it in that context, it makes a lot more sense. But if we just look at her trying to do an interview with him kind of just resting there on her shoulder, it doesn't make as much sense. That's why I keep saying context matters. In fact, in a lot of the interviews that they have together, you'll notice that she's the one who initiates physical touch.
He's one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we've cried, we've laughed.
In the interview that they did with Gordon Ramsay, where they're cooking as they're talking about the movie, you'll notice that she's the one who took his hand, and then he just put his other hand on top. So if we just look at that moment where it seems like he's holding her hand and he puts his other hand on top like this to lock her in place, it's completely out of context. If we just look at the whole thing, we see that she takes his hand and then he puts his hand on top. And if we look at the rest of the interview, she comes in for a hug, she puts her hand on his chest, there's a point where she puts her hand behind his neck. So she's most often the one coming in for those little touchy-feely moments. And then there's this wild clip from a BuzzFeed interview, which, if you find compilations on social media of Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby being flirty, like the ones that are about both of them flirting, this one's in there. But there's a whole bunch of compilations about how Pedro Pascal keeps touching Vanessa Kirby, and they all leave this one out. And that's wild because it starts to really paint a clear image of what their relationship is, because they're sitting on a couch, they're looking at some memes, and she's got her hand literally around his neck and she's caressing his neck and his ear. And it's not a quick flick or something like that. It's borderline intimate. Like she's there for a while, caressing up and down, and they're super close. To the point where when I saw it, I was like, whoa, what is this clip? And if it was the roles reversed, if he was the one doing this to her, I promise you, of course, it would be in every single one of those compilations that's about him being touchy-feely with her. Now, Vanessa Kirby has commented on this in an interview with Vanity Fair, where she said that they were both very nervous going out and representing this very important comic book in front of all these fans. So she felt that the touch was a way for him to say, we're doing this together, and she welcomed it. And so that was her statement on that. So this idea of feeling anxious or nervous, which isn't the first time it comes up when it comes to Pedro Pascal, because there's a clip from a little while ago of him at an event with Bella Ramsey, who was his co-star in Last of Us, and he says something to her about feeling the anxiety right here.
Both looking on your left. And then together straight ahead, you two. Look.
And even in that clip, we could see that anxiety physically because he's holding on to her pretty tight like this. He's not holding her hand. It's not inappropriate in any way, obviously, but there is a physical manifestation of that anxiety. Now, of course, we talk about this on the channel a lot, but there's a thing in body language that is very, very researched. In fact, so much so that it has a ton of different names: adapters, manipulators, self-soothing gestures, pacifiers. And these are massage-like gestures like this that the research has shown we do a lot when we're stressed, and it actually helps reduce stress. So touch helps reduce stress. So it would appear that when it comes to Vanessa Kirby specifically, there's this reciprocal relationship that involves physical touch. And we could behaviorally look at it and go, it helps them feel like they're in this together. It helps reduce stress. It's a reflection of the relationship they created while working together. But it's kind of odd for anyone to look at it and feel like it's inappropriate when she herself doesn't feel that way. Now, is it inappropriate given that she's in a relationship? Again, I don't know the details of the relationship. I have no idea how her partner feels towards this. I would understand if he felt it was odd, but he hasn't said anything publicly. She hasn't said anything negative publicly. And I've always said that I analyze behavior, not morality. So live and let live, to each their own. It works for them, may not work for a lot of us. Okay, now let's talk about the whole Willem Dafoe's wife at the Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony thing. So once again, context is huge. When I saw that clip, just that little clip circulating, I was like, no, I want to go watch the whole thing. So let's look at a few moments from the very beginning. First of all, Pedro Pascal wasn't just there randomly and pulled out of the crowd. He was one of the few people who actually gave a speech before the unveiling of Willem Dafoe's star. So that suggests some kind of relationship there. And we see this relationship because when he comes up to give the speech, they give each other a hug. Pedro Pascal gives Willem Dafoe a quick peck on the cheek. So we see that physical closeness. You'll also notice at this point that Pedro Pascal's right arm is, I don't know if it's a cast or a sling, but he's got an injury there and his arm is immobilized. The next thing I noticed, which is a really good piece of statement analysis, is huge. Listen to how he talks about Willem Dafoe and his wife Giada.
We met and worked together in China. He took me to dinner on my birthday with his beautiful wife and my friend Giada Colagrande.
So he says that he took him to dinner with his beautiful wife and my friend Giada Colagrande. So that's very important. The word choice here is huge. If I tell you that last weekend I went to a restaurant with my friend Danny and his girlfriend Lori, that's me telling you that he's my friend, and the reason I know her is because she's his girlfriend. But if I take the time to separate that and go, I went to dinner with my friend Danny and his girlfriend, my friend Lori, I'm making sure that you know that there's a separate relationship there. And that's really important context. Because in the way that it was shared, it was like Pedro Pascal behaving this way with Willem Dafoe's wife, which suggests there really isn't a relationship there. She's just there as Willem Dafoe's wife. But in the way he said it there, there's a separate relationship. At the end of the speech, when he congratulates them, again they hug, they each say, I love you, and there's a kiss that's suspiciously close to the lips. The way it's turned with their heads, it's really hard to tell, but they look at each other and he angles it very close to the lips. Let me put it this way. I've never congratulated one of my guy friends like that. And furthermore, this is not the first time we've seen this kind of thing from Pedro Pascal. There's a clip of him and Paul Mescal on the red carpet. I'm not sure what the event is, but when they greet each other, they literally kiss on the lips. Finally, let's talk about that big viral moment where he grabs Willem Dafoe's arm, he gets up, he turns to Giada, and he gives her this stroke on the chin. And we see Willem Dafoe, he's smiling, he does this thing with the finger that we talked about like this. And if you really pay attention, because at first when I saw it, it was very zoomed out because it was one of those vertical videos, we see the smile wipe away, but we don't see that it's not necessarily as a reaction to that gesture, but Pedro Pascal says something. If you look really closely, Willem Dafoe does this gesture. While he's doing that, Pedro Pascal is saying something to him. And if we look at Pedro Pascal while he's saying something, we see this throwaway gesture with his left hand like this. Now, I can't tell you specifically what it is at all, but this gesture typically is something that we're dismissive towards. So I don't know what he's saying. It could be a billion things, but there's a dismissive element to it, and we see Willem Dafoe react to that. And if we consider that, then it's very likely that Willem Dafoe's reaction, with this closing of the eyes, this little contempt, the eyebrows flashing, is an acknowledgement of whatever Pedro Pascal said. Kind of like he said, oh, that old thing. He's like, oh yeah, that old thing. And that also makes the eyebrow flash make a lot of sense as well, because very often we see those when we emphasize something or in social connection, like, boy, you don't have to tell me again, I'm with you on this one. So it could very well have an element of that. It does also happen if we're rolling our eyes sometimes, like, oh God. So whatever the case is though, it becomes clear that he's reacting more to what was said than what was done. And the place that's even more obvious is that most clips online just cut it right there. He turns away, the smile is gone, they end it there. If we keep watching, you notice Willem Dafoe turns back to him and says something about his, about his sling, about his strap, and Pedro Pascal makes an adjustment. So immediately after this moment, he goes right back to like, we're good friends. But what happens after that is even more significant. Pedro Pascal and Giada walk away, and you'll notice she goes over to him and she wraps her arms around him. So she gets physical with him. And if you notice, Willem Dafoe, there's zero attention there, like, whoa, what's going on there? He just touched her face. This is weird. I'm going to keep an eye on him. He turns his attention away. He's doing his own thing. So there isn't this lingering discomfort. I thought this was such a huge example of how important context is. Not just the body language, understanding the context of the situation, but understanding this whole situation within the context of what's going on, the relationship between these people. When we zoom out and we see how close they are, how physical they are between each other, Willem Dafoe and Pedro Pascal, how close he is with the wife, how she gets physical with him, it makes this moment much less awkward. Because even me at first, you see the title, Pedro Pascal gets really awkward and makes Willem Dafoe uncomfortable, and you look at it with those lenses and you see just this little clip and you go, oh yeah, that's a weird the way he caressed her face. Oh, look at that. Willem Dafoe had a smile and it went away. And you don't really see the context. And take a second, it's very easy for things like this to be spun to try to sway the public narrative. But with context, a lot starts to make a lot more sense. So as it turns out, Willem Dafoe is actually Willem the friend. So as it turns out, Willem Dafoe was actually Willem the friend. So as it turns out, Willem Dafoe... So as it turns out, Willem Dafoe is actually Willem the friend. So as it turns out, Willem Dafoe was actually Willem the friend. And this was all something that makes sense given their relationships. And I feel like so far, with a lot of what we've seen, that's what seems to be the pattern. Now, of course, if at some point there's footage that comes out of him behaving this way with an actress where he doesn't have that relationship, and she comes out and goes, that was a little weird, that was a little awkward, then I would agree. We go, hey, okay, Pedro Pascal, you got to settle down a little, buddy, because the way you act with your friends and some of these other co-stars, they're okay with it. It's not okay in every context. And maybe that exists. Maybe there are a few scenarios where he's done this that I haven't seen out there with actors or stars or anyone who felt uncomfortable with this. So in conclusion, there are two things that are really important. The first one is how important it is to pay attention to context. Very often on social media in today's world, there are people trying to drive a specific narrative and they get very selective with what they present to push that narrative. So it's important to look at that, take a step back, zoom out, and say, okay, what's the whole context here? What's really going on? And then we can make an informed decision. And some people will look at this with all this context, with all the behaviors, and go, yeah, no, it seems like it's somewhat mutual in these cases. And others will look at it and go, I don't know, there's still something weird about this. Everyone's entitled to their opinions as long as the behaviors and the context is presented properly. The second really important thing is that we can look at these specific cases and say, it seems that with Vanessa Kirby, it's fine. It seems that with Giada Colagrande, it's fine. But it doesn't mean that it's always fine in every single context. And this becomes really sensitive. Because Pedro Pascal is a really big star, and now there appears to be this narrative out there that, no, it's just the way he is, it's for his anxiety, he's a little touchy-feely, but he's harmless. One day it might happen where he behaves this way with another co-star or another person that he's working with, and they might want to say it's a little uncomfortable, but they don't want to be the person to come out and say that because everybody else is going, oh no, it's just the way he is, don't worry about it, it's harmless. So I've seen cases like this before to where it creates this echo chamber and somebody who would want to speak up doesn't really feel comfortable doing so because everyone else seems to buy a certain narrative. Now, this is not an accusation at all. I don't know. Maybe he's really good at calibrating who he can behave this way with and not. Maybe if somebody were to speak up, he would be very understanding of that and back off immediately. I don't know. All I'm saying is that I've seen it before, especially with people in a position of influence and power, to where people just discard it and go, oh no, he's just eccentric, it's the way he is, don't worry about it. And it might discourage certain people from speaking out. So if ever this type of behavior is uncomfortable for somebody, that person should absolutely speak up and should be taken very seriously. But I don't think that taking little clips out of context, especially when it involves people who they themselves aren't complaining, is the right way to go about this. It's just twisting a narrative just to push something out there and make headlines. But let me know in the comments what you think. Do you feel that because there appears to be this reciprocal relationship with these people in these clips, that it's all fine, nothing wrong with it? Or do you feel that regardless of these relationships, this behavior is objectively inappropriate? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you on the next one.